Well, some bombshell comments by Secretary of State John Kerry on the eve of the 50th anniversary of President John F. Kennedy's assassination in Dallas. The Warren Commission concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone in JFK's murder. But John Kerry is not convinced. He spoke to Tom Brokaw of NBC News.
Where do you come down on the conspiracy theories?
To this day, I have serious doubts that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone.
Really?
I certainly have doubts that he was motivated by himself. I mean, I'm not sure if anybody else was involved. I don't go down that road with respect to the grassy knoll theory and all of that. But I have serious questions about whether they got to the bottom of Lee Harvey Oswald's time and influence from Cuba and Russia.
And what about the CIA? There are some who believe...
I've never gone there. No, I don't believe that.
But you think the Russians and the Cubans may have had something to do with it?
I think he was inspired somewhere by something, and I don't know what or any. I can't pin anything down on that, Tom, and I never spent a lot of time.
It's really fascinating. The 5 decades since JFK's murder, a lot of Americans certainly have never believed that Oswald acted alone or was even the lone gunman. We're joined by Phil Sheehan, author of A Cruel and Shocking Act, The Secret History of the Kennedy Assassination, which is highly critical of the Warren Commission, and by presidential historian Douglas Brinkley of Rice University. So, Doug, what do you make of what the secretary there is saying, that he has doubts that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone?
Well, as you said, a lot of Americans share that view. There's been a big mystery about what Oswald was doing in Russia, and writers as distinguished as Norman Mailer went over there and tried to dig out documents on the Cuban connection, the fair play with Cuba, Oswald's affiliation. So I think all of that's legitimate. It's a little surprising that Secretary of State Kerry wanted to get involved with all of this. It's going to be just a plethora, maybe a deluge, a Johnstown flood of conspiracy theorists now leaping onto this and putting Secretary Kerry on top of their side. It's a little like Vietnam, Anderson, where you're either a dove or a hawk. You either believe Oswald acted alone or you believe in a conspiracy, and Kerry's joined the conspiracy camp today.
Phil, Kerry specifically challenged the findings of the Warren Commission that was established by President Johnson to investigate the assassination for not looking into his ties to Cuba and to Russia, which you uncover in your book. Do you agree with Kerry on this?
Well, there is this remarkable thing that 7 weeks before the assassination, Lee Harvey Oswald goes to Mexico City, where he's dealing with Cuban spies and Russian spies and Mexican civilians who are very supportive of Castro's revolution at the height of the Cold War, at a time when Castro is aware that the Kennedy administration is trying to kill him. And the question becomes, did anybody whisper in Oswald's ear, if you ever have your chance to kill the president, do it? And there is evidence to suggest that Oswald spoke openly in Mexico City of his intention to kill President Kennedy.
So why would the Warren Commission not have used the information if it was so important? I mean, do you think a cover-up was involved?
Well, it's clear, I think, from the documentary record, that there was a real effort to hide evidence from the Warren Commission about what happened in Mexico City. And the CIA and the FBI very clearly did not want to get to the bottom of what happened in Mexico.
Doug, Tom Brokaw raises sort of theories about the CIA, conspiracy theories about that they had some sort of a role. John Kerry dismissed that. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I think John Kerry was right to dismiss that. Again, I don't think he said anything wrong. It's just a little bit surprising. Look, this is the big mystery in America about Lee Harvey Oswald. Everybody has a feeling about it. And the Warren Commission was done quickly. The point for Lyndon Johnson was to get something out. People wanted some closure to move on with life in America. And also, how are we going to deal with the Soviet Union after this? To have floated in the Warren Commission theories that the Soviets killed Kennedy would have created a kind of a meltdown of national security, would have made the Cold War tensions higher. Hence, it was done fast and sometimes hastily, the Warren Commission. Doesn't mean they're wrong that Oswald was the lone gunman.
It is interesting, Phil. I mean, as you write about in your book, a lot of evidence was destroyed or damaged. Can you explain that and why that happened?
Well, I mean, evidence begins disappearing from government files within hours of President Kennedy's death. The night after the assassination, the Navy pathologist who carried out the autopsy actually pushed the original autopsy report and all of his notes from the autopsy room into the fireplace in his home and watched it turn to ash. And that's just the start. And in Mexico City, apparently, there may well have been photographs of Oswald taken by the CIA and tape recordings of his telephone calls with the Soviet and Cuban embassies, and all of that would disappear as well.
Doug, I mean, obviously 50 years almost since the president died. Do you think we will ever really know exactly what happened, particularly about Oswald's time in Russia, his time down in Mexico City?
It's a good question, maybe. I'm not sure we're going to get it on the 50th anniversary. The question is, what does Russia have in their archives? A lot of material's been gotten out of Belarus and other places, and the Soviet Union or Russia has contributed things, but there might be more documents down the line. As of now, I think this whole anniversary is going to end, and people are still going to be unclear on who killed Kennedy, although I'd say about 70–80% of scholars think Oswald acted alone.
Phil, I mean, do you think there was some involvement by Russia, some involvement by Cuba?
Well, we'll never know, because those questions really should have been asked aggressively 49 years ago, and the decision was made to hide a lot of this from the Warren Commission. And I should point out, though, that Secretary Kerry is just adding his name to a list of powerful people who have doubted the Warren Commission report, including President Johnson. President Johnson dies believing that Castro killed President Kennedy.
It's still fascinating to
and Robert Kennedy Jr. recently, Anderson, has questioned the Warren Commission too. Some members of the Kennedy family have questioned it also.
So 50 years later, still a lot of questions. Doug, Phil, thank you very much. Appreciate it.